Hey guys, welcome to another industry session. My name is Manny, and today we have Jay the Man Machado. He's a senior hard surface modeler at ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, a little small shop you guys might have heard of. Yeah. So I would say, Jay, if you could introduce yourself to this lovely audience, kind of give us a little bit about your background.
Hi guys, Jay. Been at ILM for 6 years now, almost. I'm actually fairly new to the industry, I guess. I didn't get started in the industry till 2011, and things have gone exceedingly well for me.
I would say so.
Yeah. So I went to, I actually have a degree in illustration. I went to Cal State Fullerton for that, and I wanted to be a concept artist. If you, I have my blog here. It's just jaymachado.blogspot.com. But if you go way back in time, 2008 is about when I graduated. You can see I'm doing a lot of just drawings and digital painting, traditional illustration stuff. This is it's actually back there in the room. But I really wanted to be a concept artist. And as it turns out, this school didn't really equip me for that. So after a couple years, couldn't find work. I went back to school. I attended Noman and basically learned everything about CG there. And just 2 short years later, I started at ILM and worked on the first, or not the first, but the Transformers Age of Extinction. That the fourth one.
Lost track.
Yeah, Bumblebee looks cool though. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, hands down.
And I worked on Transformers. I really cut my teeth. Those shows are always crazy. Lots of long hours. And I made an impression, and I got to work on episode 7. So while I was there, I was starting to do little ships and props and stuff. And then Harrison Ford broke his leg famously. And I suddenly, people started being put on other shows because things were going on hold. And I suddenly, being the cheapest guy in the room, got put on the Millennium Falcon. So I got to basically take that model to the finish line. I was the 4th artist to work on it, but I did probably 60% of the work on the model. And that's kind of what I am known for at work, as the Falcon guy. Partially because
that's not a bad thing, by the way.
No, it absolutely isn't. I also modeled the F7 X-Wing, but it gets overlooked. But it was working on the Falcon was really cool. Although it was very frustrating, I wasn't happy with the square antenna, the square dish. And there were other things they were doing with animation that I wasn't really super happy with. So I ended up starting my own at home, which I will show you guys at some point today. And this is my other blog. It's called Falcon A. And this kind of catalogs my personal Falcon build. So I built the one for ILM, which was a nice first draft. But this is the Falcon that I put my stamp of approval on, basically.
Cool. Right on.
Yeah, we'll get into more about the greebles a little later, but cool. So after F7, I worked on Rogue One. I did a lot of cool stuff for Rogue One, mostly the Star Destroyer. And after that, I went on to the Millennium Falcon ride for Disneyland, which was kind of it was an interesting thing because it's in real time. So it was something that ILM really hadn't done. And now we're doing even more stuff with real time for The Mandalorian, which is what I'm currently working on. So I'm actually going to work right after this to work on it. So that's the nature of the industry.
It sure is. It sure is. All right, cool. Yeah. So Perfect, dude. So, give us if you give us an overview of just your workflow and how you create the amazing work that you do so well.
Yeah. So, typically at ILM, you get 2D art from the art department, and like one of the questions kind of to prep for this was who's an artist I look up to, and this is actually one of those artists. His name's James Klein. He's one of the art directors at ILM, and we would get work kind of like this. Maybe it's rushed, maybe it's a little more fleshed out. Sometimes we even get models that we just have to kind of clean up, and they become assets. But eventually, what ends up on screen is kind of what my work is, I guess. Typically, and it's something that I go over in the class. You'll get a piece of artwork, and you just start by sort of blocking it out. There's different philosophies. Sometimes people will do the box modeling. Sometimes I'm kind of more of a create faces and extrude kind of person. So, for example, if I let's see. I go this way, I might create like a center line here. I'll just create a quick shape, just a quick car shape. I grew up around cars. My dad really loves working on cars, so I've done a lot of cars, as you'll see in this scene. So I'll do something like this, kind of get the center line of the concept lined up with that, and then I'll kind of use the method where I'll start extruding this way, and then that'll be basically the foundation for, I'll bring this out maybe to the side to meet up with the corner, that type of thing. And it's all by, moving points in space kind of lining up with the art, and that's kind of how that goes. But once the blocking model's done, you kind of just get into the detail. And I wanted to show these cars because this is kind of like it's like a time capsule for me. This is a car that I did at school, and then this one was also done at school. But it's kind of like you can see the progression of basically how it's done. I'm gonna just turn wireframe unshaded on real quick. So this is a Bel Air. My dad actually has this car, so it was kind of great having good reference. Basically, could just walk out to the garage and see it. Took a lot of photos. And what was interesting about this is really, I would say, my first successful hard surface model. Now there's stuff that I look at now that's like, this is just a flat plane. It doesn't have any thickness. Some of this stuff is floating. Some of this stuff is just way higher res than it probably should be. Like, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. I think it would just smooth at some point, but this would be probably too high res by my standards today. Just in terms of, there's lots of edge loops here that aren't really contributing. But onto this one, this is a little more, this starts to get a little more reasonable. Now this has like a smooth preview applied to it, but there's not a whole lot of wasted topology here in terms of extra edge loops and stuff. You guys hear my cats crying out there? Annoying.
I don't hear it.
Okay. He loves attention. That's
okay.
It's fine. I'm not being cruel to my animal. But yeah, this is actually what's interesting about this car too is the Bel Air has no interior. It's just kind of empty in here. But this is the first one where I did like a full interior. And I had really great concept art to go on for this guy. I can't recall the artist's name. It's been several years, but I could maybe look that up later. We could, I don't know, put it in the addendum or something.
Yeah, there you go.
This is probably one I did maybe like a couple months after school, and it's funny. There's lots of mistakes on here that when I look at it now, I'm like, ooh, like this is pretty ugly in terms of what, I mean, once it deforms, it doesn't look super bad, especially with the wireframe turned off, but not how I would work nowadays. And it's kind of funny to like look back on this stuff like that. But, you know, every time you do a model, even at work, it's like, oh, this is going to be it for, you know, we'll model this now and we'll be using it forever. And in some cases that's true, but like this stuff doesn't have a very good shelf life. It never has. And I don't know if it ever will, because the technology keeps getting better. Techniques change, and it's just, you know, it's not built to last. So yeah. I look at this now. I actually opened this when I kind of started teaching with CGMA. I opened this back up to like do some key shot renders, and I was like, well, I didn't really finish the interior. Geez, what was that? That was my G chat. I'm gonna close that up. I didn't really finish the interior out at all. I mean, I started like the steering wheel, and in the end, I decided it just wasn't worth it to even render this, because it just wasn't
pretty good to me.
Wasn't there? Yeah, I mean,
the shapes are pretty solid overall. I mean, yes, the details of it's like, you know,
right,
it might not hold up, but I think it's a solid model though. There's
just stuff like, you know, these corners and stuff that if you look at what I'm doing, that like there's no supporting edge here. There's just a lot wrong with this model. Yeah, and that's kind of I always tell. It's funny because teaching with CGMA, I see the same things, you know, in student models, and it's kind of like, you know, the one lesson that you should learn from hard surface modeling is to have those supporting edges. And just as an example, anytime you have any sort of plane change, I'm just going to quickly use the bevel tool on this, give it some spans. Oh, shoot. Segments. There we go. And this is going to be a pretty ugly shape, so don't judge me. But and I'm just going to extrude that out just as an example. But anytime you have any sort of plane change, you need to support it. So I see a lot of stuff like this where people will support the one side but not the other, and you know, you get artifacts. It looks bad. I mean, partially this is just a bad example maybe, but stupid walk tool. Let me see. So I mean, I've kind of and this is part of the thing I'll show in the class, but or I do show in the class, but there's a few scripts that I have, and this one it was actually scripted out by my good friend Landis, so it's Landis Fields Auto Crease. But what's cool about it is if I click it, I freeze Maya.
Someone was asking actually. Someone was asking, what do you use to create bevels? So I used to do a lot of it by hand, but nowadays the bevel tool in Maya has gotten really good. Now, I mean, initially you get this kind of just chamfered edge everywhere, but what I like to do is turn off chamfer, and then you kind of get those supporting edges that you need, and they're consistent. And sometimes I'll mess with the mitering a little bit. If I do radial, I kind of like that result better but then sometimes I get weirdness on these curves. But I've found this extremely useful using the bevel tool, which has been, you know, just updated. Yeah. And the specific question was from Ranjit, which is, do you have any efficient tricks or fast ways to give supporting edges to complex hard surface models? It's all, I mean, I like this, like I said, I like this bevel tool.
But it's all in how you select the edges for this tool. Sometimes you will get a kind of weird stuff. Oh, geez, that's terrible.
Like that?
Yeah. Sometimes you'll get kind of weird stuff if you have kind of a complex thing. For this is the actual model that I model over the course of the class. But for this guy, I actually took a different approach with the body, and I kind of hand drew a lot of this stuff. And it's just about, well, this is probably not the best example because I actually retopologized a sculpt to get this topology. But let me find a better example here. Like this piece, for example. It's just that using that bevel tool really. Let me see. But yeah, I mean, you get weirdness here. Like this probably isn't ideal here, because you would want this edge loop to go all the way around. So I probably should handle that better. I think what it was is I wanted to support these edges this way, but it probably should be something more like this, actually. And then I can just terminate that edge there and get rid of these two edges here. And now I'm happy. You can delete that and make it quad if you want, but
Kerr is asking, are you anti-Boolean?
Oh, actually, I use the Boolean quite a bit in Maya. It's gotten really good. A lot of times, though, like if I wanted to add, say, a cylinder to this shape here, a lot of times what I'll do is kind of use you just cut those edges in. Like, for example, I might throw an edge here and here. And sometimes I'll just sort of trace the circle around. But the Boolean tools are actually quite good. And if I just get out of this tool, I just want to combine these two. Then it becomes just, how do I clean up these edges? How do I add the support that I need? A lot of times it takes a little more planning with how many spans should I put around this cylinder, and maybe we should actually look at that. I turn the wireframe unshaded on. So I kind of, if I want this cylinder placed here, I'll kind of look at, how many edges I have around here to play with, right? So we've got, one here, the corner, it's kind of 3 in the middle. So let's just say 3, 3, 3, and 3. So that's what, 12? So if I should do a 12-sided cylinder. And that'll just make my life easier in terms of what to do here. But I'm happy to use the Boolean tool and figure all that out afterwards. So, there is a bit of cleanup required. I'm going to just isolate this because I was getting weird stuff. But, I can then go in here with this tool, the multi-cut tool. And I mean, there's stuff to figure out still, like what is this curvature going to look like once I delete like this edge here, and what is my supporting edge loop going to look like, type of thing. But
cool. No, so I would say, Jay, if you could continue with just talking about your process.
Right.
So it's my fault. I'm the one who asked a couple of questions, so I'm to blame.
Yeah, but this is, this kind of ties into it. This is something that I might do to get this kind of a shape. But in terms of like building this stuff, you can kind of tell by the way this topology is moving, kind of how I did things. You could tell that this was probably started by more of a boxy shape and probably more of a lattice. This is way, way, way too high res for what it is. I baked in a smooth at some point that didn't need to be baked in. but I mean, it depends on the piece. And like for this guy, for example, as I said, I had kind of this high-res sculpt that I made in ZBrush, and then I kind of drew this topology over it. And I basically drew, and my process for that is really just about defining those plane changes, and then filling in the blanks, basically. But then like something like this, I'll just build from a cube, or this I'll just build from I think one of these torus things. So it really depends on the piece in terms of like the hero body panels. But the greebles are kind of where it changes, where it's a different process. Now, greebles are something that we definitely, me and Manny wanted to talk about today. Should we just get into it now? Or?
Yeah, dude, let's do it.
Okay, so if you go to the Wikipedia for greebles, it's kind of like it's using, pieces for surface detail, like kitbashing, essentially, right? So, and I actually have over the course of working on Star Wars, I've grown this new appreciation for actual model kitbashing, and I did want to show one of my other kind of heroes from work. Where this is not the right article, but his name's Bill George. He's a practical model builder. He worked his first film at ILM, I think, maybe not his first film, but his first Star Wars film was Return of the Jedi, and he built like the Imperial shuttle and a bunch of the spaceships for the space battle. But this is his website. It's called Sci-Fi Air Show, and he'll build these awesome practical models, and then he'll photograph them and sort of make it look like they're sitting on this tarmac at an air show. It's a really cool idea, a really cool site, and he's been like a huge inspiration and a bit of a mentor at work.
We're not seeing anything on. Well, I'm not seeing anything on the site yet. Is it still loading?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Are you guys seeing? Are you guys seeing the site? On my end, I'm not seeing anything. It's just white.
Okay.
Cool. Yes, Kirk. That's something that we are planning on doing. Oh, guys, guys, can everybody see it now? Can you see the screen? Yes. All right. Great.
Awesome. So these are kind of these are a bunch of images that are I found on the Replica Prop Forum, which is a forum of basically practical model builders that they try to recreate these studio scale models, and these are images of the docking rings on the Millennium Falcon. But you can see that they've essentially identified where all of these kit parts have come from, and so this is all catalog. This is stuff that I found out really late in the game when building the F7 Falcon, which is part of the reason why I decided to build my own at home as well. But there's really cool stuff here. Let me find a specific one. So this is kind of the inner mandible section. You can see the dish up here. But this is actually a kit part from a Ferrari. And I actually have the actual piece right here. So you can hopefully see it. Let me see if I can see it in the webcam. But it's that piece right there. And I kind of got into sort of buying and collecting these kits. And I actually have a whole bunch of images downloaded that are just flat scans of the kits. Let me pull up that one in particular. Oops. So here's this is the wrong one, but you can see anyway. This is kind of an example of one of these scans that I use, and I'll pull this in on an image plane into Maya, and I will start to kind of build these parts out. So that's kind of where a lot of these parts come from. You can see this part here if I isolate it, and let me just turn off the wireframe. This actually comes from this kit right here.
Oh, cool.
So That's one of the workflows that I've adopted pretty recently, and it's been really cool. What I like about it is it's almost like if you think of an impressionist painter, they're creating the impression of detail. But these model kit parts they're tiny, right? So they're never going to be as detailed as like a real Ferrari engine. And that's what I kind of like about them is there's just enough detail there to accomplish something. It's like the impression of a mechanical piece, but it's just this simple plastic thing. So that's been really instrumental for me in finding both, just as a workflow and just in finding the look of Star Wars. I want to, but I mean, as you can see, a lot of this model is just made from kitbashing. So kitbashing is kind of like whereas you can see like these ones, lots of custom built pieces, right? But this is mostly, I would say, mostly kitbash, and that's kind of where working at ILM has shifted my workflow a bit. ILM's been around a long time, and they've been doing CG for a long time. So they have libraries and libraries and libraries of car parts and all kinds of anything you could think of, buildings, windows, lighting fixtures, all kinds of stuff. And so a lot of my job has become kit bashing, essentially. So that's kind of something that I wasn't really taught much at school, and it's something that I really wanted to teach in the class. So part of the class is I send out a lot of these kit scan images, and let me just find an example. And I'll just view large icons. Come on. So I'll send out like these images of these kit parts, and I'll have the students kind of build the parts, and then eventually we come up with a library. So let me open that up real quick. And this is something that like when I had this idea for the class, I really like got excited about it. I wanted to kind of simulate that kind of teamwork element of building parts as a team, because this is very much a team sport. I mean, not only are you modeling something that another person's going to rig, another person's going to texture, and another person is going to, animate and all that stuff. There's that team element, but you're also part of a modeling team. And a lot of times we'll share parts, we'll run ideas past each other, we'll, give feedback to each other. And that was part of being on the job that I really didn't feel as much as a student, because a lot of times when you're a student, people will give you feedback, but you're kind of like, well, I only care what the teacher says, At least that's how I was, because sometimes you'd get feedback from another student, you'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about, So that was something that, like, once these people go from being students to being your colleagues, you develop, much more respect for them, I guess. I don't know. But that was something I really wanted to pass on, was like not only, building these parts together and it's kind of a, collaborating afterward and being able to kit bash is fun. And, I have students that have done some really cool models with these parts. If I go, let's pull this off screen so I can look. Oh, it's not in this folder. I should have gone back. CGMA images. Oh, dang it. All right, well, I'm going to have to look that up later, probably.
No worries.
Yeah, maybe it is in here, actually. Oh, I thought I updated that. Dang it. Sorry, guys. I'm kind of stumbling and bumbling, as I often do. But here's some examples of. Actually, this is. I think Tim is in this Q&A.
We're going to put him on the spot.
Yeah, there you go. This is Tim's work. Obviously, most of these pieces.
Can you guys see this?
hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Can you guys see Tim's work?
Yeah. So,
yes. Okay. Oh, well, Tim's saying, yes, I'm here. All right, great.
Tim, killing it. So yeah, this is an example of, his work using these parts. And I thought he was really successful, especially in these areas around here, at kind of creating that impression of detail that I was kind of talking about. And that's what's really cool. But as you start to build these parts, and I actually find it kind of fun, a lot of times you get home from work, you're tired, you don't really want to work on a big project, but you open up one of these images and just model a part, and eventually you end up with something like this, which is, my library of parts, which as all these parts were part of the Falcon essentially, but now I've just got this.
You're going to crash the session.
I thought you were being serious for a second. Oh no. But yeah,
oh my God.
So these are color coded right now by the model kit that they came from, because I was essentially going to do a key shot session where I would show all that. But these parts right here are actually the ones. So it's kind of cool. I mean, and it does help. I mean, some of these kits are expensive, so don't go crazy and buy them all like I did. I didn't buy all of them, by the way. I just bought a few. You can see them kind of stacked up back there. But having them as reference, as well as like the image reference, is really, you get a sense of the depth of them, because it's really easy to kind of go from the top view and not really know what you're looking at. Let me just turn default material on. Then you go over to the side view, for example, and then you're like, oh, some of these have, really a lot of depth to them. But, there's other aspects to these parts as well. The ones from the class are obviously all built to kind of subdivide. But my personal work, I wanted this Falcon to kind of work in a game engine. So a lot of these are very, very simple geometry without sort of those supporting edges. And, it served me well in terms of that Falcon, but I might also revisit it and use other techniques like face-weighted normals and stuff like that. But I mean, from afar, they actually look. I mean,
they look pretty high res. Yeah.
Yeah, some of them, but I mean, then you see the topology. It's not like this one's almost 4,000 polys, but like this one's only 232. I mean, they vary. A piece like this, though, with supporting edges would be a lot more. So it's kind of like. But anyway, yeah, the ones for the class are probably a little better because they do actually subdivide, and if you get close to them, you can sort of do that at render time. So yeah, after the kit bashing, I'm just going to open that car scene up again. One of the other things that I really, I guess I'm into in terms of this stuff, kit bashing's fun, greeble parts are great, but I guess why I made such a splash when I got to ILM in terms of them, putting me on these awesome projects, is I'm very technical as well. I like, I was always very good at math and equations, and I like playing around with like node networks and stuff. So I like to teach a little bit as well, and in terms of the rigging. So I'll do some, like for example, in the class I do some basic setup of like this motion base piece, and we sort of rig it. You can move it around, and it'll sort of move. But this being able to set up stuff like this kind of helps me to design mechanical stuff. So this landing gear, for example, I've got I thought I must have not saved that animation. I'm going to select this, and then I'll turn off selection highlighting and grab this So I kind of let me actually do a keyframe so it can get a little smoother. Let's set a key, and let's just do like I'll do 40 frames. Doesn't really matter, but so this it allows me to kind of figure out like, you know, how would these landing gear work and design that way. And I've had some students do some really awesome stuff with these techniques. Just this term, there was a student who did this Optimus Prime model, and he didn't finish the model. It's very difficult. I know there were a lot of questions in that Manny had forwarded me that have questions about time frame, and a 10-week class finishing a model like this is really zealous. It's probably not enough time, and I definitely know that it took me longer than 10 weeks to do this. But it kind of, my point was I wanted to just give a lot of tools and workflows. And this is one of the things that I'll set this kind of stuff up at work all the time, just to like figure out, okay, well, how would this piece move? How would it, you know, how would it perform? What is the mechanical force that's driving this joint or something like that, you know? And that's kind of, I think it's helpful to know that kind of stuff, you know? But even like stuff like this where it's really not as much rigging as it is just sort of, you know, organizing your hierarchy and setting up these set driven keys that just sort of mess with the rotation of things. I have this air brake as well. But these sort of things are like, they're fun for me to set up. So I love to do them. Yeah.
Really cool. No, that's great. All right, cool. Yes, and are you going to show the full Falcon?
All right. Save the best for last. So I'm going to open up this scene because the cars are one thing. I think a car is kind of a good, you know, test of skill for a hard surface modeler, especially the more complicated and curvy the surface. Blocky Star Wars ships are actually like not that difficult to model, but the kitbashing element is kind of what carries them, you know. For like a car, you'd have a lot more complicated parts, whereas this, it's, you know, the complexity is in the detail, really. So I have this scene, and I just want to scrub the timeline again to show you that, you know, I'm using this stuff all over the place. I've got these shocks here that kind of work with the doors. You can kind of see them a little bit.
Wow, dude, I didn't see that before.
Yeah, so
oh, that's sexy.
Thank you.
Do that again.
All right, so here's the door. So it's all set up. It's pretty easy to set up. It's just a couple of constraints using locators. Tim knows, he went through the class.
Yeah.
And yeah, the other thing that's tricky about the Falcon is this ramp. So I have this book of Star Wars blueprints, and I'm just getting it up on my other screen. Let me see, source images. Where's the blueprints at? Okay, so I have, oh, that's the wrong one. Dang it. There's one of the ramp.
Hey, Jay, let's try something. Could you just try as a test? Could you kill your cam, the webcam?
Okay.
I just want to see something because it's coming in and out, so I don't know if if it might be just the res of the cam. We're gonna miss your handsome mug, but let's just see if that you know, this helps out a bit.
Right on.
Cool. Continue.
Just find this image. I know it's here somewhere. This one. So I had this blueprint of the ramp from this book. And this is actually, if you do a Google search, you could probably find this image. But the tricky thing was, you've got these struts that go straight up and down. So if you actually look at this ramp, and this is part of the thing that I get into on my crazy blog, but it actually gets longer as it goes down. and you can see that stretch happening over here. And I think how they did it on set is they actually had these things sliding around, but it was an interesting problem to solve, because really the like, if you would think of this as a circle, and let me just sort of demonstrate. This is kind of a tangent, but there's primitives, circle. Let's just do 90 degrees. If I sort of place this at the pivot point here and just sort of line it up with the that ramp, you would see that this thing would travel really in an arc, but it really doesn't. So it was kind of an interesting problem to solve. But, having that kind of technical way of thinking was really helpful for figuring that out, I guess. So one of the other ships that's you'll see on like my profile and stuff, I think it was the mail that went out for this webinar had it, but this is the cloud car. Once again, it's all this stuff is meant, it's going, I wanted to see it in VR, so it's very low res. One of the things that's kind of funny is I actually have a scan of my face, so that's actually me in there, and then me with a crudely modeled mustache.
There you go.
So that was kind of fun. There's always opportunities, even at work, for doing fun stuff like that, just hiding your name in the textures and stuff. But they discourage it, but it's,
we all do it.
We all do it. Exactly. One of the things that bugged me about Force Awakens was the way that the guns behaved. And I think I have a GIF, actually, of, let me see, find this thing. View details. Sorry, okay. So I made this little animation of how the guns are supposed to
oh, sweet,
kind of move around, and this is all on that Falcon A blog. But yeah, so in Force Awakens, if you watch how the guns behave, it's not great, and it was very frustrating to me. And I wrote angry emails, and they were kind of just like, "Is this guy nuts or what?" But,
you're like, you got it all wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So that's probably part of the reason I have the reputation of being Falcon guy also. Yeah. But I mean, these things were figured out in the 70s, and why not just do what they did? I just didn't understand. So
if it ain't broke.
Exactly.
Cool, dude. So all right, let's you got a couple more, or we could jump into questions.
I do. So we've got the cloud. We showed the cloud car already. I want to show you kind of something that's in progress. And it's this one. This is the Dash Render's Outrider,
dude.
Which kind of my own spin on the design, but it kind of is a good example for how I kind of do this stuff. I'll have kind of this base shape that I work from, and then I'll really just cut these panel shapes in, and then with a series of extrusions kind of develop this paneled look. This is kind of a good example here of, dang, it's not that one, it's this one. So you can see I'm starting to cut in shapes. For example, if I want to do a panel here, I might grab faces, and a lot of times I'll just extrude like 0.05 or something. That's a bit much, but and then just kind of delete this edge around there, and now I've got kind of the basis for a panel that is ready for some extrusion. That's how I did a lot of the panels on the Falcon and stuff. It's just kind of cutting in, like having basically a big puck that represents the shape, and cutting these lines into that shape, and then you kind of get that shape. And you see lots of N-gons here. But
no,
I'll clean it up. I'll clean it up later.
Could you zoom out? Could we see the whole thing again?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful model.
So you can see I'm starting to play with the kit bashing a little bit. A lot of the stuff is just ripped directly from the Falcon, but it's manufactured by the same company, so I figured, why not?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of
cool. No, this is great. This is great. So let's just jump into a lot of the questions. I know people have been waiting to get to some of these.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have John wants to know, do you have a huge library of small models that you carry on you to use at your work?
I don't carry them on me. There is a
you have a thumb drive.
Yeah, exactly. No, putting a thumb drive in at ILM, like alarms start going off. So
yeah.
Definitely do not carry that stuff around. There is an extensive library on the servers at ILM though, that I have to work from, and a lot of those greeble workflows are that I did on F7 were adopted on Rogue One. So we actually took parts like this and 3D scanned them, and actually had I think we outsourced it, unfortunately, but had people build the parts for us to use. And that's one of the reasons I think Rogue One was really successful at capturing that look, is because we had just the right parts to use.
Cool. John also wants to know, is it okay with studios to use your own model library at work?
It is in a way, but I would discourage it just because you don't like. It's almost, I hate to say it like this, but they almost don't deserve it. Like for example, I'm sure, if I took this Falcon model to work at ILM, they'd be happy and they'd use it. But I've put so much time and effort into this, it's almost like I shouldn't give it to them for free, And I feel like it's the same way with model parts. If you have model parts that you've built on your own, it's kind of like, if I were doing freelance, I might use it, but the second you put that stuff in a model and put it in a studio, they own those parts. They can do whatever they want with them. So yeah, I kind of would discourage that kind of stuff. But no,
I would agree.
It is an option that you could bring them and do it, but there's just consequences to it.
Exactly. Nat wants to know, do you have to instance your Kitbash parts for production to make them more efficient for final renders?
So we do not do that at ILM. We tried it on Rogue One, but it was kind of a can of worms. There were lots of problems with the pipeline with getting it to work. For example, the second you instance something like, for example, I've got these parts on here, right? They're all the same. But if these were instances, they would all get the same texture. So it's kind of like, it's almost worth it to just have them be individual pieces, so we don't see 4 pieces with the same paint job on them. That was kind of the problem that we ran into. Just talking and not really doing anything in here. Turn on this environment. I've started to build kind of this Cloud City environment. So eventually, and it's cool. I've actually gotten this.
I'm sorry. Can you guys see it now? I can see it.
That's awesome. Cool. I've actually brought this into Unreal and looked at it in the Vive, and it's fun. It's cool. I was surprised how small it seemed, but yeah.
Let's kill the webcam again.
Oh, kill the webcam. All right.
Cool. All right. So, and I know this person left, but it was a question a couple of people had. Okay. Anastasios wants to know how are all these getting textured? Do you do the UVs before you start duplicating and populating them for the Kitbash scenes?
That is actually a great question. Anytime I make a Kitbash part that I'm going to duplicate, I always UV it first. Even if it's just laying the UVs, like flattening them out, unfolding them, I always do that. And I'm a big proponent of work as you go. And part of the reason, when I have students make those greeble parts, I definitely have them do the UVs so they can, sometimes they don't get to them, which is frustrating, but
cool.
Yeah, that's a must. There are ways to transfer after the fact, but that's a lot to wrangle, and it's slow. It's a slow process.
So we have a couple of questions about your course. So could you give us just an overview of what your course covers?
So we start off with kind of just camera alignment with the concept art, and move into blocking models. We do some ZBrush sculpting for like the car body, for example. If I go back to that scene, we do some retopologizing of that sculpt, and then we get into more of the greebles and kitbashing. And after that, there's kind of a, I'll say the last third of the class is kind of random. It's we do some rigging, we do some tools with using NURBS curves. There's also different deformers, wire deformers and stuff. Just tools that I found really useful as a modeler. Just super useful to know. We cover making rims, tank treads, kind of the 101 stuff for hard surface, the bread and butter stuff.
Yeah.
And the final couple weeks, we cover UV tools, rendering, and then I always end up getting some light texturing stuff in at the end, usually over the Q&A. It's not really part of the class, but it's something that people always have questions about and that I'm knowledgeable about. So I throw that into usually the last couple Q&As.
Cool. And what skill level should they be in before taking the class?
I try to be pretty thorough. I try to be pretty thorough about explaining tools and stuff, but I think that basic knowledge of Maya interface, being able to tumble around, knowing how the move tool and some of the basic tools work, extrusions, that sort of thing. But beyond that, it's
basic modeling knowledge.
Yeah, just basic, very basic stuff. I mean, if I say create a cube and you're scratching your head, that's probably a problem.
Yes. Definitely. And is there any, someone's asking regarding the greebles, do you have any scripts for placing greebles?
I know that they're out there, but I don't really use them. A lot of times I will, for example, if I wanted to place this on a surface, let me send it a pivot real quick. I might do something where like I just snap it to a point, for example. Oh gosh. This thing is a beast sometimes. I might just snap it to a point and then kind of just eyeball it.
Yeah.
There's a lot more eyeballing that happens.
Yeah.
On the job than you might think. That was one of the things I had a lot of trouble with because I really like being precise and having like perfectly, I think the angle of this mandible is like 26.5, and that was as far as I wanted to go decimal point wise. So I really like that kind of nice round numbers and even things, and it was hard to kind of get over that, especially on like a transformer. It's just too much. You can't do that. You just got to move things around until they look good.
Cool. Yep, I completely agree. And another question is, what process do you use for cleaning N-gons? We had a few of these.
A lot of times I will do them kind of by hand. For example, I don't know if I have any N-gons on here. Yeah, I do. So if I actually, let me just isolate the whole cloud car. And a lot of times the first step is really just identifying them. And if you go into face mode and grab all your faces and go to select use constraints, this little window pops up and you can go all in next and n-sided, and it will basically select all the N-gons that you have. And it looks like I've got 180 of them. Sometimes then I will isolate the faces and then I'll just grab the objects and isolate the objects, and then you can kind of see where those n-gons are living. Right now, it's these areas where I've just done. And here's an example of me using the Boolean tools and not really cleaning it up afterward. Looks like there's some stuff here. Yeah, see all these. Now, there's a couple ways of doing it. There is, and before I move on, when you use this, be sure and hit close and reset, because you will, if you exit it, and I'm just going to move it off screen, and you try to select a face that isn't an n-gon, like, oh, why can't I select this face? It's because this constraint is still on after you close the window. Always hit close and reset on that. This little sidebar, but yeah. I mean, there is the Maya cleanup tool. I don't really like doing this. This is like, push of a button cleanup. It says, what is this? Faces with more than 4 sides. If you hit cleanup, it'll do a decent job, I guess. In this case, sometimes it doesn't. The other option is to go up to mesh and hit triangulate. It seems like it did the exact same thing. It's probably the same operation. But a lot of times I will just clean this stuff up by hand. It's really the only way to get it how you want it. And like I said, this part in particular is not built to subdivide. But so my methodology is going to be like just a little bit different. But I might do something like that just so I can kind of contain those triangles, and then maybe I run the triangulate like this, cool. And then I get something that's decent. Yeah.
Cool. So moving along, do you think Juan wants to know? Do you think that ZBrush workflow will replace your Maya workflow at some point?
So I'm not actually a big fan of ZBrush, to be honest. I do what I have to do in there, and I get out. I think that they're, the live Booleans and the new stuff that they've added is really, really impressive stuff. But the interface in there is just too unwieldy, and exporting is if you're not careful, you can end up with exporting a mesh that won't work in the pipeline. There's that merge thing that you always have to do, and then but yeah, I mean, the thing is, and this goes for programs like Fusion 360 or Moy, you can use Booleans and develop all these great looking shapes that will render really well in ZBrush or even in Maya, but it's not usable geometry for film. It needs to be retopologized, and I find that the tools for that are just easier in Maya. So it's kind of
cool.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Bartels wants to know, how much time do you have for your personal projects?
So I'm kind of crazy with the personal
I can attest to that.
Yeah, lately I haven't done much because I've been working like 60 to 70 hour weeks. But I usually spend at least 2 to 6 hours a night working on this stuff. When I was in the heat of building this Falcon, I was up till like 2, 3 a.m. and then I go, oh crap, I better sleep. So it depends on the subject matter, really. This Bespin environment has taken surprisingly a long time for me to kind of get through. It's so simple, but a lot of times, it's just, it's the stuff that you're not as interested in that just takes longer.
Yeah.
But
I wouldn't call it simple, Jay.
Right. Shape-wise.
Yeah, exactly.
There's not a whole lot of complex stuff going on these buildings.
Yeah. So Manuel wants to know, open subdiv creases or supporting loops?
Okay, so here's my little rant on creases. And I might just do a new scene for this just because. So we use creases at ILM. It depends on the supervisor if they like them or not. But let's apply some creases here. Go to my crease set editor. Where is it? Modeling editors, crease sets. And I'm just going to grab all these edges and apply some creases. So if I smooth it, it looks like nothing, right? It looks like kind of crappy. So you have to increase this crease number to something like 5. And you see nothing's happened. And the reason nothing's happened is because we have to subdivide it more. So you have to go up to display optimal mesh subdivision level. And what this means is that this has smoothed the mesh. There's a crease level of 5. So it has smoothed it 6 times. I think every once in a while you can see let me see if I get that to show up. This display. I don't know how to get it to display the actual vertices, but if you look at the poly count, 24,578 for this cube. Now, if I were to take this and just do the simple bevel tool trick that I always do, and we kind of tighten up the edges to be about the same, and I smooth that. Let me just get smooth. It's about the same, but look at the poly count, 866. So I cannot believe for a second that creases are more efficient than fencing like this. It may make for a smaller file. Like obviously when you're unsmooth, this is 8 verts versus the 56 that are on this one. But yeah, so your myosine is going to be less, but at render time, there's no way that's more efficient. And that's my rant. So not a fan of creases.
Cool. All right, so and I'm going to just mix it up here. We just have so many questions. Real quick, how big is the Millennium Falcon?
The one at ILM is about 3 million verts, but it's got creases on it. Mine is about 1.3 million verts, and it is not built to subdivide. So it's kind of like neither one is a really accurate
yeah.
Of what that model would be if I built it as a subdivision model. But
cool. All right. Another question from Wolfgang. So real time is going to be used for the next Star Wars movie? ? Will you guys do the exact same process as for video games, baking from high-res models and stuff?
So we are using more and more real time, especially in San Francisco. It's not being used as much for film, but it's kind of being used. We're looking at TV, and obviously the Millennium Falcon ride is a real time experience.
Cool. Let's try something else crazy, Jay. And as someone who's a big fan of AO, it pains me to do this. Could you switch to a regular view, like let's see if we could exit out of viewport. I want to see if that does anything.
Viewport 2?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't even.
It does.
Wow. I guess in 18 it only has viewport 2. But I did turn off the AO.
Okay. Okay.
Is it still really frozen?
Could you rotate around a bit?
What does it look like when it freezes?
It literally looks like you're not moving the cursor at all, like what's happening right now.
I mean, as I'm answering some questions, I'm not moving the cursor.
Yeah, like for the last 30 seconds, you haven't moved the cursor at all?
I'm kind of moving in a circle right now.
Yep. So, but it's there you go. It just popped up right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So it literally just popped up, but it's all good. So the other question is, do you use 3D Code for Retopo?
No, I just use Quadra and Maya. As part of this modeling toolkit. Oops, what's that? Paint effects or something? And it's just Quadra, and it's it needs a live surface. I find it actually really intuitive. I used to be in games at Sony Santa Monica, and I used Topo Gun there, and this is kind of a lot like topo gun. So
cool.
I've isolated both meshes.
And while you're doing that, we have a couple of software questions.
Sure.
What's your thought on Modo? What do you think about Blender and Unreal 4?
So I haven't used Blender. I haven't used Modo for modeling, but I've seen some awesome stuff out of Modo, so I know it's possible. I use Modo mainly for actually baking textures. And that's quickly kind of being replaced by Substance Painter for me. Modo is way better at handling tons of UDIMs. If I actually delete these two, I can look at some Falcon UVs. So this guy, I've got, I think 70 UDIMs or something like that. Open the UV editor. This is probably it's probably not gonna like this. Yeah, viewport deprocessing. So it's a lot to put through Substance, especially when Substance, the way it handles UDIMs is as texture sets, and you can't really paint across them quite well yet. Mari is really better for texturing, but Modo is kind of more integrated with Mari, and it understands what Mari kind of wants. So the baking of like ambient occlusion or normal maps or curvature maps out of Modo, I preferred it from there. If I have a lot of UDIMs to do.
Okay, cool.
You
have Model, Cloud City, Ship, and the others. And the Millennium Falcon.
So the Millennium Falcon it took about a year, but it's just not every night. It's not 8 hours a day, so it's not a really great, it's not a really accurate statement. But I was working on it for about a year before I called the model, essentially finished. And that was with like UVs and everything. The one at work, I think the number is like 4 months, but 3 weeks in there was devoted to the X-Wing. So the X-Wing was 3 weeks to maybe like a month of work. The Star Destroyer, for example, was several months. And that one, it just kept coming back up because we'd see it in shots and it would need more detail and etc. So
cool.
That was kind of the story there. Did I lose my UV window? Yeah, my Maya's locked up, so I might just kill it. But
yeah, I would say go ahead and do that. You have a couple open, right?
No, just one.
Oh, just the one? Okay, yeah. Let's just kill that. If you have that image, we could just, answer the last few questions with that. The one of the Millennium Falcon, I think that top-down view. Yeah. That's sexiness.
That's just a key shot.
Yeah, it looks beautiful.
Let's see. We have something else interesting to show. Anyway, continue with.
Yeah. So, is there? So Adam wants to know what kind of things would you recommend an entry-level showreel contain for modeling / texturing position? How complex should your pieces be?
That's a tough question. Let me see. So you want it, I would say at least like maybe 4 to 5 pieces at the very least. Usually, there's a prop in there. Usually we see cars and stuff. And lately it's been a lot of environments. I think environments have been really popular. And we're kind of looking for that kind of work. So I see a lot of that stuff. Never mind. But it's kind of hard to say like a specific formula. The one thing I will say is that one thing that I see quite a bit as students kind of contact me about the class or whatever is people are very unfocused and they try to put too much non-specific stuff in their reel that isn't really focused on what they want to do. Like for me, I knew I wanted to make spaceships and cars and hard surface stuff. So my student reel is very, it's a lot of that. And then at the end, maybe there's like one sculpted or kind of stylized piece. But if you want to work at a studio like ILM, they are looking for photoreal renders. They want stuff that is going to hold up in a movie. So it can be simple. It can just be, a prop or a small vehicle or maybe a small scene, but they just want it to look real. And they want you to be able to kind of know how to do that stuff. Now, what's hard about that is like, well, maybe my texturing isn't as strong, or maybe my rendering isn't as strong. And that's kind of where I'd encourage you to collaborate with other students and other people and be involved with these forums and kind of get feedback and get help from other people if you're struggling with something. But I mean, for me, it was kind of like that. They saw my reel and they said they saw that I understood what was needed for photoreal. I don't think my reel looks photoreal, but they kind of saw what they were looking for in my reel, I guess. So it's hard. I mean, my philosophy for personal work and student work has always been I have to have fun. It has to be something I enjoy. That's why I'm modeling stuff like Batmobiles and Mach 5s and stuff. One of the things that was instrumental in my student times is the very last class I had. It was a portfolio course, and we basically had 2 weeks over the 10 weeks. We had 2 weeks to model a piece from start to finish using concept art. First week you do the model. Second week you do the textures and lighting and rendering. And that kind of really helped me get up to speed. And it produced most of the pieces that are on my reel. So that's kind of, it's kind of a long-winded, weird answer, but
no, I think that's pretty good. So Owen wants to know, do you have an idea or target for the total poly count of an asset? Or do you get feedback from other folks in the pipeline? Do you add more greebling on the model that will be shot up close, et cetera?
We usually try to aim to be lighter and then up-res if we need it. There are modelers, and I won't name any names at ILM, that in my opinion, overbuild things. And they, and those are the kind of models where you hear that they have problems rendering. I would rather keep it as light as I can and then get the note that, this isn't holding up in shot. We're going to need to address it, because it's really a process. I mean, you can't anticipate every camera angle a director is going to want. You can't anticipate what the destruction is going to be like, because destruction is always part of the process too. Especially like on Rogue One with the Star Destroyers, it was, you can't anticipate all that stuff. Like for the Star Destroyer, for example, we had to build all these interior guts, because you see that thing sliced open essentially at the end. And if we were to build all that up front, and then we see 20% of it, it's kind of a waste, Mm-hmm. So, in terms of target poly count, it's really more about the aesthetic. It's not like a specific number. It's just, and that's the reason you have dailies and you have model soup that's kind of guiding you is, you don't just start and finish model something and then pass it along. It's a process. And, people will tell you, oh, you know what? I think it needs more detail there. And I think, this, you could probably delete the bolts out of that area. We're never going to see it, that type of stuff. So it's kind of like, there's no real like aforementioned like aim for where to do the poly count, I guess.
Cool.
Kind of a weird way of saying that. But yeah.
That makes sense. So Diego wants to know, if I'm a CAD modeler, Rhino Fusion, and just a bit of 3D Studio Max, can I get into movies?
So the generalist department at ILM uses Max, but they are responsible for delivering frames. So they do a lot of background set extensions and that sort of thing. The modeling pipeline is really built around Maya and our proprietary software, which is called Xeno, which is essentially Maya. It's very similar. It's just the structure of what it does is a little different. But I mean, the thing is, especially if you work in Max, these modeling techniques kind of carry over to every software. Now, if you're more of a CAD guy, though, it probably won't. You won't be able to get your model into the movie directly. It will need to be retopologized as a polygonal model. We haven't had any. Well, I don't know. The thing is, I don't know if we haven't had any luck or if we just haven't tried with the CAD stuff. But I do know that we had a junior artist who was a Fusion 360 guy who was hired for his quote unquote design eye, and he didn't last very long because it's really not just about modeling. It's the whole pipeline you have to kind of work within. So there's more than just pull inverts around. Really, it's managing file structures and you know. I don't know if if a CAD model, if you can even UV that, but the texture painter needs UVs, so it's kind of like where do we go? We're stuck now, you know.
Yeah, cool. So speaking of UVs, it's like I already know the answer to this, but do modelers Nat wants to know, are modelers usually required to do UV wraps to hand off the texturing?
In most cases, the answer is yes, the modeler is responsible for UVing. At ILM, the texture painters do it. But as someone who models and textures, I usually will opt for the whole philosophy of model as I go, and the texture painters love me for it. It's a team. If you, for example, if a model like Bumblebee is painted and then we get a note from client or whatever to update that model, and you're a modeler and you just destroy the UV work that's been done, you're not going to be very popular with the painters. It's a team, and you need to accommodate other elements of that team.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we're going to take just two more, guys. I'm terribly sorry. I think we have about like 50 questions left, but we're not going to be able to get to, any of them. So just two more. I know Ranjit asked this a couple of times. What software do you prefer for baking normal map, AO, and cavity of the model, which has more than 8 UDIM tiles?
So for 8 UDIM tiles or more than 8, I really think it's just so easy to do in Substance Painter, and I have pushed 34 UDIMs. That's my max that I've pushed so far through Substance Painter. I haven't tried more than that. This is all I'm saying. But if it is like hundreds of UDIMs, I would say Modo. Modo's a bit more manual to set up to do that stuff, but the information is out there. Okay,
cool. And last question from Alex. Are you using any hard surface modeling plugins or scripts in Maya that you could recommend?
Not specifically. I use the pretty vanilla version of Maya. The script I use the most is one called SwitchCam, which basically I have a hotkey set up for, and you switch from the perspective to orthographic based on your view. So if I'm kind of looking down at the model and I hit the hotkey, it'll snap to an orthographic top down, for example. In terms of other scripts, I mean, I guess I could just look at my scripts folder. I don't recall them off the top of my head. My 2018 scripts. Comment rename is one that I use all the time. It's just
comment rename. I remember that one.
It's just a renamer. Sometimes if I'm working with concept art, I will use Zoomerate, which basically allows you to zoom in on the camera without moving the camera. The other thing that I use is there's that one auto crease. I don't want to open Maya back up, but
yeah,
essentially auto crease, what it does is it sets normal angle by 30 degrees, and then it opens the use constraints editor, select use constraints, and selects the hard edges. So I use that one a lot just to kind of get those hard edges after I've when I'm doing bevels and stuff. Maybe it's worth opening up for that. Yeah, whatever.
Cool. So I think that's about it. I know you have to go to work.
I do.
On a Saturday. So that's the reason why. And we're already supposed to be an hour-long session. We're already 34 minutes over. So, okay. Jay, thank you so much for, sharing your time with us and sharing some of your wisdom, your experience so much. And everybody else, thank you for attending. We obviously do this for you guys. So thank you for sharing a bit of your weekend with us.